Welcome to APD. Today's question comes to us from Isaiah 22. Let's take a look at the question. Now Isaiah 22 says, "And I will place on his shoulder the key of the house of David. He shall open, and none shall shut, and he shall shut, and none shall open." Okay, we got to think about keys, he, his. Who's this talking about here? We got to look at the context. Context is key here. So let's look at the context, right? Look at it. It says it's referring to Eliakim and a guy named Shebna. Shebna was the main guy in the house of Hezekiah. He was the governor of King Hezekiah's palace. And God had just had enough of this guy's sins. He had sinned too much, and God wanted to remove Shebna. And so he was telling everyone that he's going to put Eliakim in his place. So that's the he and his it's talking about in this passage. But what is the key here? Is it a literal key? Is it a figurative key? What are we talking about? Well, it could be both. God says that he will put the key on his shoulder. Back then, the keys to locks were made from large pieces of wood, and Eliakim would probably have had the key on a rope or a cord that he would have slung over his shoulder, and that's how he would have carried it around. So literally, he would have had the key on his shoulder. But we can also see there's obviously a figurative idea here, and the key represents power. As all good maintenance people know, once you have that big ring of keys, you got some power now. You got some responsibilities. So we see this in the next line of the prophecy, which says, "He shall open and none shall shut." Eliakim would have great power in Hezekiah's household and would be the one that would grant or deny access to the throne of David, which Hezekiah sat on. So that is Eliakim's key. But does that relate to the other keys of the Bible? Maybe not directly, but the metaphor of the key as being the sign of authority and power is definitely carried throughout the Bible. For example, Matthew 16:19, Jesus uses very similar language in reference to the apostles' authority in the church when he says, "I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loose in heaven." And then you go to Revelation 1:18. Jesus says that he holds the keys of death and Hades. That's obviously a figurative way of saying that he holds the power over death. He holds the power over hell and Hades. And then if you look at Revelation 3:7, the relationship between Revelation 3:7 and Isaiah 22, it's hard to miss. Here's what Revelation 3:7 says. It says, "Write to the church in Philadelphia. Thus says the Holy One, the true one, the one who has the key of David, who opens and no one will close, and who closes and no one opens." Here Jesus uses the same phrase that is said about Eliakim, and then he applies it to himself. So the key that Eliakim had could only admit people to the earthly throne of David. But here Jesus uses the key idea to open the door to the heavenly throne. So the key always represents power and authority throughout the Bible. And in this way, all the keys in the Bible that are mentioned are in one way related. That's my answer for today. If you have any other questions, go to the website, put your questions on there, and I'll be happy to answer.